This is a contemporaryconservative.net podcast. This is another episode of Conservative Conversations with your hosts, Reid and Frank.
Hey, reader, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Doing just fine. It's a pretty day, some cold wind, but pretty day.
Yeah, it's pretty nice up here where I'm at, and yesterday was beautiful. I went out on a walk with a friend of mine uh, around the neighborhood. It was great.
I'm sure it was. Nice to get out.
Sure is.
Well, let me ask you, did you hear what's going on up on Capitol Hill today?
Not yet today. Been a little busy this morning, so I haven't got to catch up on any of the news going on in the early hours.
Well, I'll tell you, from my point of view, I think it's pretty crazy. They've got everything shut down. Congress canceled all their sessions for today.
Both houses?
Well, they canceled all their sessions. They're not there on the Hill. Everybody's got their tail tucked between their legs, and I guess they're maybe at home or somewhere else, but they're certainly not at the Capitol.
Do you know? Do you know why?
Yeah, because I'm sure you might have seen, but yesterday, I think it was the Senate Committee on Homeland Security, they were interviewing Christopher Wray. He went up and testified. Did you see a couple of
Uh
those
huh.
headlines?
I saw that he was testifying, but I didn't see any clips of him being there.
Well, it was pretty boring. I watched on and off only for about a half hour total. Is what I probably saw of it. But apparently, as part of this testimony, they have reason to believe somehow they had reason to believe that the Capitol was going to be attacked again today by these QAnon people.
Oh
Why?
gosh,
Yeah,
really?
why they think the QAnon people are going to be up there storming the Capitol? I don't know. I don't know what's significant about March 4th, you know. But I know one of the other things they discussed was there was a bunch of chatter that the Capitol was supposed to be attacked on January 20th, too, when Biden got sworn in. And
Right.
nobody showed up to that one except there were left leaning protesters, but there weren't any right winger protesters. So where they're getting this information or why they think it's a viable threat, viable enough to shut Congress down, just baffles me. I can't really understand. I mean, part of me wants to go back and review Christopher Wray's testimony, but it's so boring. I don't really have an interest, but I'd like to know where they're getting this information. Why QAnon is such a threat, why they shut the Capitol down. I mean, it's just mind-boggling.
From what I've heard, the FBI had plenty of you know chatter about January 6th happening, and they didn't really do anything. But it seems like now they don't really have all that much to go on, and they're doing this.
Yeah, it's almost like they're just stringing the story along,
Yeah.
keeping fear alive. I don't know why. I don't know what purpose it serves.
Well, I
Leave.
know they still got the barbed wire going around the Capitol and the White House, right?
That's correct.
I've
Yes.
heard complaints about that. Yeah,
hmm
and it's supposed to stay there until fall. I've heard.
I wouldn't be surprised if it stayed up permanently.
Yeah.
There's an effort to distance those representatives from the people they represent, and we're not
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be. We're supposed to be kept at a distance. It's not just the QAnon folks, but it's
Right.
all of us. We're not worthy.
They're a special type of people.
That's exactly right. I've heard they somehow put on their pants differently.
Yeah, by having people do it for them.
Yeah, they lie on a nice sofa with their legs extended, and a whole team of people put their pants on for
If they got people grabbing the arms and lift them up, people pulling up each leg, putting their each leg through the pants and pulling them through the whole deal.
Sounds about right.
Both legs at a time. Not like all of us who do it one leg at a time on our own.
Well, I'll tell you something else that's been in the news. Governor Cuomo stuff, Andrew Cuomo.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about all the backlash he's facing?
It's about time. Um, he's a pretty crappy governor, and I think his whole attitude supports the idea that I've heard people call him a bully. He's seems rather smug a lot of the time. And the other day I was thinking to myself that, it came out pretty quickly right after all the uh, COVID nursing home stuff about him. Between that and when these allegations about him,
Right,
the sexual allegations,
right.
and I thought to myself, well, that's pretty interesting because, of course, these women could have brought it up any time, and I think, you know, I think it's serious stuff for sure. I'm not just dismissing their claims, but I think for some people in the Democratic Party, it's a good cover for people focusing on his mishandling with the old people during the early stages of the COVID breakout.
Well, that's exactly why I brought this up to you because I find it not really telling or surprising or anything of that nature. I mean, when you're a politician, you make a lot of enemies. Even if you don't
Mm-hmm.
try very hard, you're always
Sure.
going to end up making some enemies. So the idea, and he's been involved in politics forever, forever. He's followed
Yep.
his daddy's
Family
path,
deal. Yep.
right?
Exactly.
So I'm sure there's a lot of people who still have even more damning information on Cuomo.
Sure.
But what just fires me up, gets my goat, is that, this the pandemic stuff went on for so long. It's been here almost a year, about a year now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And, he could do no wrong. Now, obviously, he ticked a couple people off, but if you look at overall coverage of Cuomo, I think he won some kind of a prize, didn't he? He got an Emmy,
He got an Emmy.
a
Yeah, an Emmy.
daytime Emmy for giving
His
those news
briefings.
conferences, whatever they were. Yeah,
Uh.
I mean he's been lauded through this whole thing. He's been
Oh yeah.
Certain people have called for him to run for president because he
Mm-hmm.
was such a good example through all this. And but then we knew all along because we're conservative minded. We knew he was making mistakes. We knew he wasn't
Mm-hmm.
the example, the shiny example everybody ought to look to.
Right.
But still, as news starts coming out, he made this mistake, he made that mistake. He was caught exercising, without a mask on. He's doing all this
Right.
stuff, do as I say, not as I do. Nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens. Then the worst of it comes out that they undercounted these deaths. He sits there and says, "What's it matter?" It's like the Hillary Clinton Benghazi line. "What's it matter? They're dead. What's it matter who how many?"
It was the nurses. It wasn't the fact that he was sending the old people who had the virus back to the nursing home. It was the nurses coming in and out.
Yep. But no backlash, no backlash, no backlash. Then
Mm-hmm.
the sex scandals. And oh my gosh, how the mighty fall. He's
Yep.
just getting beat up left, right, and center all over the news, no matter who you turn into, except for his brother's program, of course. But everywhere else, he's just getting slapped down a rat hole. And that just infuriates me about people, about our culture, about the media.
Mm-hmm.
He can literally do everything wrong. Kill. He can kill people. Nobody cares. It's all swept under the rug. But he touches a girl who has a backless dress at a wedding, and oh my God, we got to get this guy out of office.
Yep.
How
Yep.
sick is
He's
that?
Yeah, he's not politically useful anymore.
It's absolutely shameful. It's shameful. On the flip side of the coin, though, I'm sure you heard about Governor Abbott down in Texas.
Oh yeah, that Neanderthal.
That Neanderthal. I think you've been listening to Juan Williams on the Five.
Well, I heard that Biden said that's Neanderthal thinking for
Well,
Texas and Mississippi to do that.
what's his face? Juan Williams repeated it then. I didn't hear Biden say it.
Yeah,
I think it's amazing, though. I want to move to Texas. I mean, he said,
right?
we're done. No more mask mandates, no nothing. They're done.
Well, what people, and it's, the media doesn't point this out on purpose, but what people seem not to get is he only removed the mandate. It's not like he's saying, don't wear masks anymore.
Right.
He's just removing the state government mandate for people to have one in certain places. People can still wear masks all they want. Businesses can still require people to wear masks in their businesses all they want. The only thing that happened was the governor said, we as the government of the state don't require it anymore after a certain date. I don't even think it's gone into full effect yet.
Well, I think it's wonderful. I mean, I think the
Yeah.
places like Florida and that
Uh
wonderful
huh.
woman out in, where is she, North Dakota or South
South
Dakota?
Dakota, the
South
warm
Dakota.
one.
Yeah.
You got to see her speech at CPAC. I thought it was good.
Um, I don't know that I heard. I might have heard a few clips or something. Um, I don't remember though, but I'm pretty fond of her, and those
Mm hmm.
governors in those states have done phenomenally well.
Right.
I think it's time for our poor little DeWine to wake
Yeah.
back up and get things going here again. I don't know when he comes up for re-election, but he's not going to get my vote this time.
Uh, I think in 22. I think he ran
22.
in 18.
Well, I'm not voting for him. Tell you that. I'll vote for his number two, John Husted. I still like John quite a bit, but
Yeah, he's
uh,
pretty good.
but I'm done with DeWine. I really think his true colors came out in all this.
I do too. Um, and speaking of running, one of the things that happens at CPAC each year is a straw poll where everybody votes for their favorite conservative. I don't know what the actual question is that they pose to the people, but not counting Donald Trump, who I believe came in first in all of them, but Ron DeSantis was first. And then second was Kristi Noem from South Dakota.
Yep,
And a lot of people think that Ron DeSantis would be a good run for 2024.
yep,
And I think that he would be, but I don't see it happening because it was either on Hannity or Tucker, maybe a month or so ago. He pretty much already admitted that he's going to run for governor again in 2022. But of course, he can always, serve his 2 years and then run for the president. But he seems like the kind of governor that would stick out his term. Um, so, do you have any thoughts on who, like, if you think he'll run, or if you think he's a good pick, or who do you think might be the next upper comer, up and comer?
well, I do have some thoughts on it. I don't know that this far out ahead that I'm really pulling for anything or really have any
Sure.
good notions, but
Right. Right.
I've heard some interesting chatter. And just to pick up on what you're saying, I mean, I think it would be a good idea for DeSantis to stay in Florida.
Right. Yeah.
He has some good power there in Florida. Florida's been a pretty good state for us.
Yeah.
I think him staying at the helm, keeping Florida open, keeping their
Mm-hmm.
economy open, I think would be very good. And maybe leave the upper level stuff for somebody else. I'd
Right.
hate for somebody to replace DeSantis and get Florida into a predicament or a worse spot.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
and especially with Trump living down there now, I know that there could be some hinky issues. Like, For instance, the way that now that he's not president anymore, they have gotten his taxes. They've
Yeah,
gotten
I've
it
heard
turned
that up in New
over.
York.
hmm And so I like to think of Trump as having at least a layer of protection at the state level so that now that he's a resident of Florida, the state of Florida can't just pick on him, attack him,
Right.
get things. So I'd like to see somebody. I understand that Trump and DeSantis get along pretty well. So I'd
Uh huh.
like to
Yeah.
see that dynamic stay where it is. And
Yeah.
on a similar topic, I've heard the idea that Trump may run for Congress out of Florida.
That'd be interesting.
Yes, I think it was just somebody spitballing, but
Sure.
it's an interesting scenario that I heard. It has definitely hung around in my brain. It's total malarkey at this point.
I think he'd have a heck of a lot easier time getting a local seat, that's for sure. Or even, if it's in the, Florida U.S. Senate.
Well, see, and that's why I started by saying what I said about DeSantis still maintaining his
Mm-hmm.
power, is because assuming a vacancy arises, he has pretty good authority to put in whoever he wants. I mean, not in all situations and circumstances, he can't just pull
Right.
anybody out of a hat, but to keep in mind that he could, I mean, let's just say, for the sake of spitballing here, that he could just plug Trump into a vacancy. I
Right.
think that's a pretty cool idea. But let's say, and I don't know whose original concept this was. It's not mine. Just repeating it. But let's say Trump made it into the Congress out of Florida. He won a seat in the House. Then somebody said something to the effect of he wins the votes for Speaker. He becomes Speaker of the House. Then they impeach Biden and Harris together. They impeach them both, and he becomes president again.
that's an interesting theory for sure.
Isn't it? But still, it did get me thinking. It got the little wheels in my head turning, and the idea of Trump going into the Congress rather than running for the presidency in 2024 is quite a concept. And in that case, I think my pick for president, this is really hard. I don't know. I don't have a good one, but I'll tell you somebody I still trust probably more than anybody else in this country. Did you guess where I'm maybe going?
I'm not 100% sure. Do they serve currently?
I do not believe so. I could be
Oh, then I have
wrong
no
though.
idea.
Well, you're gonna have to help me come up with the name anyway. I can't think of it right now. But our Secretary of State under Trump,
Oh, Mike Pompeo!
Mike Pompeo, I think he would be one hell of a presidential candidate.
Yeah, he'd be good. I think he'd be good.
I like him. I trust him. There's not too many politicians I could say that about. I'll give you one example. I like Ted Cruz, but it's a very on again, off again relationship that I have with Ted Cruz because he speaks out of both sides of his mouth. He'll get into bed with anybody. He's a true politician. I like him when he says the things that I like. But would I put him in charge of the country? Hell no. Anybody but Cruz.
Yeah, I like, in general, what he does as far as conservatism goes, but he's not my favorite one, that's for sure.
No, he's too greasy. But he's just like Chuck Schumer in that regard. Chuck will
Yeah.
say things out of both sides of his mouth. He'd say anything. And they all do. But
I find his general tone and attitude kind of off putting. Just the way
we're
he
talking about
talks.
Cruz, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and I don't know if you've ever seen him in a meeting or like a round table discussion, but he comes off as a very eager beaver too. He always wants to be called on. He
Mm-hmm.
always wants to say something. Heaven forbid somebody doesn't mention that Ted Cruz is at the table. I mean, you can
Right.
just tell he's a ham, to put it politely.
Mm-hmm.
He always wants to. He's sort of a diva, wants to be right in the spotlight.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, I heard like Tim Scott's thinking about a potential run in 2024. I think he'd be pretty decent.
I think I think a conservative of any stripe
Sure,
would be
got
a
that one.
great choice. Um, I don't know about the whole identity politics thing, but just given that it sort of is the way of the world right now, I think it'd be. I don't know. I don't know how to quantify this, but it would definitely be a strategy, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know how particularly good of a strategy. I don't really agree with it, but if we're talking long term success of the party, it might very well be necessary. I think a Tim Scott would be a much better choice than somebody as polarizing as Candace Owens.
Up, that's exactly who I was about to bring up next. You kind of beat me to it. I was gonna say she, I guess, is making hints that she might run.
I think that would be a mistake.
Yeah, I I think so too.
I love
Um,
little Candace Owens, love her to death. I'm so happy for her. I understand she just had her baby. They seem very happy. But she's such a polarizing figure, and she knows
right.
it. She knows that she's capitalizing on it, and God bless her for it.
Oh yeah.
But to put it at the national level, I think would be a terrible, terrible mistake.
Right. Yeah. But who knows? We got quite a at least 2 years before people really start putting it out there that they're going to be running.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. This last election had my head so screwed up for a while that
Yeah.
hard to think long term about who should hold power.
Right. That's true.
I don't think any of them are deserving right now. I think they ought to bulldoze the Capitol and start over again. Well, the only other thing have written down here that we haven't touched on is about the stimulus. I understand that it passed
Oh.
the House. Not just the stimulus, excuse me, but I mean it sort of is a stimulus package if you want to look at it that way.
Mm,
The
yeah. The
1.9
1.9.
trillion American Rescue
Mm-hmm.
Package or whatever they're calling it. Um, I understand it passed the House. The Senate made a couple of changes. They stripped out the $15 minimum wage. That is not going to fly. And they settled on a figure. It'll be households, I'm sorry, excuse me. It'll be individuals making $80,000 or less will qualify for the stimulus payment, and married couples making $160,000 or less will qualify. So, as I understand, those are the only two changes that have been made, but they still have some ping ponging back and forth between the two chambers to do before they can put it on Biden's desk. But the
Oh yeah. Probably
earliest,
reconciliation.
yeah, the earliest that I heard Biden might sign the bill would be by the end of next week. So
Hmm. We'll see. I'd like to find out what else they finally got crammed in it.
I've seen some breakdowns, and there are certainly some things in there that don't need to be, especially when you
Mm-hmm.
consider. Well, like let's just look at one of the more favorable programs, the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, that came out of
Oh yeah.
the first CARES Act. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as I understand it, there's something still to the figure of like $183 million sitting in the PPP program right now that haven't been dispersed. And they're talking about adding another, you know, I'm going to make this figure up. I don't have it in front of me, but they're talking about adding another 300 million to the pot, and it does seem kind of silly when you consider that there's still all this money sitting there in the PPP account that hasn't been spent.
Hmm.
I understand that that's the case for several rounds
Yeah, I
of
was gonna say I've
stimulus.
heard that about school funding for schools. There's still money that they blocked out for schools that hasn't been spent, and the extra money they're trying to get out of this bill isn't supposed to even be spent until like a year or two from now.
I heard some of the spending may not take place until 2024.
Yeah,
So I mean, it's pretty silly, because you hear Biden and Harris and some of these other people, be polite, get out there and say, "Oh, America needs this now."
right.
But we're talking about spending trillions of dollars in 2024. So I mean, what?
Yeah,
How does this? It just doesn't jive, does it?
nope. I mean their whole plan doesn't jive.
That's exactly right. And I'm sure there are some people out there just desperate for the money. I'm sure of it.
Hmm.
But on the whole, doing something like what Abbott just did in Texas would be a crap ton better for everybody involved, for the
Yeah,
individual, for the government, for the programs. Instead of just being funded and funded and funded and funded and funded out of the Federal Reserve,
with money we don't even have.
we ought to get back to what Democrats like: tax and spend. You spend it from tax. If you don't tax, you can't spend. We've gotten away from tax and spend. Now they just spend, 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 baby. I don't know. I don't know how they expect it to work. But, that gets into a whole different topic I think we could spend another half hour on, because it almost gives the impression that they want to spend us into bankruptcy, that they want us to hit rock bottom, that they want America to be ruined. But I'll save that soapbox for another episode.
Well, I'll just kind of put a point on it real quick. I said if they do all that, then they can come to the rescue.
Well, I just wonder
That's how
who's
it
going to
goes.
come to their rescue. China's been funding us the lion's share. They've been the lion's share provider of these future funds we've all spent. And
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder, when the government goes belly up, what happens? I don't think there's enough
Who
gold in
knows?
Fort Knox to save Uncle Sam.
Not from the Chinese.
Well, and especially, I mean, what are we up to? We're closing in on $30 trillion in debt, are we not?
Pretty close. Be there before we know it.
I think we're somewhere between 21 and 23 right now. Then
Yeah.
you tack on another 2 trillion, and then I hear sometime this year they want to do an infrastructure bill. They want to redo the roads, bridges, and highways and byways and all that. And that's sounds to me like another easy trillion. So it sounds like we could be at $26 trillion debt by the end of the year.
Yep. Keep on racking it up. When you can print money like it's going out of style, well, why not?
Yeah, I heard 1/5 of all dollars that have ever been printed were printed this year. Well, 2020.
Right. I believe it.
All right. Well, that unless you had any other things you wanted to chat to the people about.
Nothing in particular. Nothing that comes to my mind specifically. I think we've had a pretty good conversation.
I'd say so. Nice, polite little conversation for a Thursday afternoon.
That's right. Then I guess we can leave it there for now, and we can catch up with our listeners later, or then catch up with us, however it goes.
All right. Well, we certainly wish anyone out there well, and we thank you for listening.
That's right. Remember to leave a review and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, and visit our website at contemporaryconservative.net.